Welcome back. We are on round two with Dr. Teagan Willes today on this episode of the Lifestyle Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Derek Williams, and really looking forward. Last time it was really fun having you on, Teagan, and kind of talking through things, and we didn't really go into depth really on the 50% increase that you had in daily production, and we talked a lot about mindset. I would say was the biggest kind of focus of really kind of turning your practice around. And so today we're going to kind of get into two main ideas, and that's case acceptance and how that has led, and maybe some other things as well, that has led to the increase in productivity in your practice. So let's start off, maybe kind of like we did before when we were talking about goals. Talk a little bit about your perception in regards to case acceptance, or how you viewed yourself, how you had tried to improve or get better, or was it even a focus? Talk a little bit about that, and then we can kind of get into some of the more of the details.
Yeah, so case acceptance, I've known that case acceptance is important part to running a successful practice. For me, I didn't think it was a particular weakness of mine. I feel like I'm reasonably well spoken. I can have conversations with people pretty easily. I did think one of my weaknesses was in talking about treatment. I wasn't always good about making clear recommendations. I would kind of list some options and then leave it up to the patient to kind of choose what seemed like what they wanted to do. And I oftentimes the patients would kind of almost feel my own hesitation in not having a great a clear path forward. But at the same time, I could give them the details of the different treatment options and what was involved in each of them and how long they take and what they can expect. So I felt like I could convey information about treatment, but I wasn't always good about telling them maybe what was the best treatment or even what I would do or what I would recommend. So I had some things that I thought I was doing reasonably well, and some things that were not my strongest suit.
Yeah, yeah. And I would agree with you as far as that assessment. I think you're the type of person that you're relatively laid back. You're pretty chill. You connect with people, make people feel comfortable. But as we'll talk about, there are possibly some negatives to that approach as well. And I think one that you kind of just touched on a little bit, which I experienced in my practice as well, is just not being as direct with patients as you could be. Sometimes they're coming to us looking for more direction, and if we kind of, put our hands up and say, well, it's up to you to decide, and we don't like give them better feedback, then that can make it a little bit difficult for patients and their experience and whether or not they get work done. So talk us through the process, because this is something that I've only recently started doing. And I would say out of all of my clients, you're probably the one that has taken the greatest advantage of this. So talk about it from your perspective, what the process has been like as far as us working through and finding areas to improve.
Yeah, so we talked about it. We talked through it, you and I, on a call, and talked about what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses. And then you recommended that I start watching myself, listening to myself talk to patients. So you had me record my conversations with new patients and then listen back to them. And then once a month, send you one of the recordings so that you could hear how I sounded and how I talked to patients, how I connected with them, how I talked about treatment options, made recommendations. And then you would give me some advice on that, and then we would rinse and repeat, do it the next month. And that has been very eye-opening. And it's been a great experience, a great net experience, which comes with its own discomforts. But that's kind of what we've been working on.
Yeah, yeah, and I completely agree with you. Talk through some of the discomforts, and maybe like what was maybe like the first thing that really stuck out to you as something that you may not have realized about yourself that then became a focus for what you wanted to change.
Yeah, just listening to myself was, I mean, maybe this is not other people's experience, but listening to myself, I just thought like, oh man, I could do so much better than this. And it was like I was listening to somebody else and thinking like, oh, I could present this case better than they could. Talking about myself.
Yeah.
I listened to my own speaking mannerisms, and I did a good job letting patients talk. I wasn't interrupting them, and would I had some active listening going on, but I kind of skipped around from topic to topic. I would find out a few of the patient's interests, and then I'd ask like one question about each thing, and then move on, and just kind of stayed pretty surface level. And then got to clinical things, looked at their X-rays, looked in their mouth, gave them a few different treatment options, let them kind of decide what made sense to them without as much direction as they probably would have liked. And then, that kind of concluded the exam. So mostly it was just that I kind of skipped around and didn't really get to know them as much as I wanted to show them that I heard their answers and addressed briefly the things that they mentioned without going any deeper than that.
Yeah. And one thing, honestly, this is something that I didn't completely realize until listening to your first consult was this exactly. You were, and again, before I say this, I just gonna say that how much I appreciate you being willing to talk through this, especially in like kind of a public setting like a podcast, because even to talk through this now and to be open about it is impressive, right? It's you're willing to kind of talk through things, and you're willing to allow other people to kind of learn from some of your mistakes, or some of your lessons. So yeah,
I'm ready for the roast. No, bring it on.
no, so yeah, we talked about in that first consult that you sent me. You were good at talking to the patient, but part of what I felt was that there wasn't a lot of very intent listening. That you would ask a question, they would answer, and you kind of would just kind of jump on to the next question or the next thing without necessarily like providing any feedback that you like really heard what they said, or kind of digging into it deeper. And what the really cool learning point for me was that then when you got into the exam and talking about dentistry, you had kind of like established the pattern for communication with the patients. So because previously and so far you'd been kind of like staying very surface level, then when it came to talking about their teeth, their smile, dental health options, it still stayed kind of surface level. The questions were kind of there, but there wasn't, it wasn't really inviting a lot of feedback or thoughts from the patient side. And so that was really interesting to me to kind of see the correlation that the way that we interact at the beginning can actually carry into the dental exam. So that was the learning point for me. Tell me your perspective on that.
Yeah, it was interesting when we were talking through that, and even as you were saying, kind of having that realization yourself and explaining to me what you were understanding at that point. We made a shift, and you encouraged me to instead of trying to lightly touch on several different topics, listen to what they're saying and follow through on one of those things, and ask several follow-up questions, and discover more about who they are and what motivates them, and how does that affect their life, why do they like doing it, why is it important to them, and just get to know them on both a personal level and on like a core motivations level. Like what are they all about? What do they care about? And what are they looking for as well? And as I began to do that more in the get to know you portion of the exam, I establish with the patient that I'm listening intently to you. I care about you as an individual, and I want to know what you care about. And then when we moved into the clinical portion of the exam, I was able to already understand kind of where their values were. And then when it was time to present some treatment options, I could align my recommendation for them with their values. If finances are their core concern, I can give a treatment recommendation and show them how that lines up with their concern. If their concern is they want to maintain their teeth for their whole lives, this is the recommendation I can give you for that. If it's cosmetics, whatever it is, they've already shared with me what they care about, and I've shown them that I am listening and I can cater their treatment specifically to them. And they feel a lot more willing to share those things with me. There's a bit of vulnerability there as they share more about their personal lives. Then we move into the dental arena, and they're willing to either tell me directly or indirectly what they want, and I'm able to show them not just the modality, but the outcome. I can say, if you want healthy teeth for the rest of your life, we can do that. And here's the things that can get you there. And we focus a lot less on the clinical details. How does how do implants work? How do crowns work? How do clear aligners work? How does the whitening work? And we more focus on what they're going to get out of it and how they're going to be on the other side. And that has been much more motivating for people. And there's a lot more trust built in our relationship.
Yeah, I love that. Um, it's I'm also curious to hear how it has changed the way that you experience patients. You know, a lot of the conversation that you've shared has been from how you kind of perceive the patients. Like you're perceiving that the patients now feel more heard, and the relationship is, they think that it's deeper, that you care more, and then that transitions over into dentistry. But how how has that changed your side of the experience with your patients?
Yeah, it's been really cool and really interesting to care more deeply about people and to really feel that connection. Like from a professional standpoint, it's been helpful as far as the practice goes, but for me as an individual to feel like this is this is a person in my chair that has a life and has a family and has values, and I feel so much more connected to the people that come in, and it's less about what dentistry can I do today, and more about how can I help these people meet the needs that they have and overcome their fears and their concerns and their anxieties or whatever it is. And it's suddenly more about a relationship and a personal service rather than the business of dentistry.
Yes. It's really interesting. It reminds me, I may have shared this before. I'm pretty sure I have, but there's a uh, there is a karma yoga. There are a few different tenets of karma yoga, and one of them is to basically not go into a certain action, or not go into a scenario doing something to try and get a specific result, which may sound very counterintuitive. But in this situation, why I'm even bringing that up and how I'm hearing it is that in the past you may have thought, had the thought of like, okay, how do I make patients like feel like they have a good relationship with me? How do I like make them feel like I'm hearing, or that like I'm a good dentist? That's I'll be really curious to hear your thoughts after I explain this. But it seems like at the beginning you maybe had more thoughts of that, and your approach has changed more to not necessarily caring more about, not thinking as much about their perception of you, but you just trying to ask more questions and focusing on your own experience, focusing on how you can understand your patients better. And when you can actually focus on on your side of things, on your perception, the funny thing about it is that their perception actually improves. So when you stop thinking about how they're going to perceive you, their perception actually improves. Tell me your thoughts. If does that make sense? And do you agree with that?
That definitely makes sense, and I do agree with it. And I think if I were to sum it up as simply possible, I would say it became less of a it was less about business and it became more about service. And I felt like instead of being, almost transactional in a way where I offer goods and services, you come to me and I give you goods and services, it became about like, what can I give to you to improve your life? And how do I get you to that better life that you're looking for? And, I happen to be able to do that with dentistry. But if I were in another setting, it would feel the same where It's how can I, give you something to improve your life. So it feels much more like a service and service oriented than it used to.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's just a fun, it's a fun way to live. And I think it makes sense why patients' perception improves in that situation because it allows you to just be yourself a little bit more. It takes you're kind of taking the pressure off of yourself by not thinking of their perception, and you're just thinking, "Oh man, how can I understand this person more?" And it's it's fun. I think it's fun to like
It
apply
is
it.
fun.
Yeah, and one way that I thought that this was so
It,
interesting.
yeah, it is fun, and it's more fulfilling too. And I feel like too, I've mentioned this to you as well, just that um, after starting to implement this, even talking to current patients that I've met, a few different times, and I've already done some restorative work with them, even with those patients, it feels like our relationship is getting deeper and it's more fulfilling. It's both more fun and more fulfilling. So it's been enriching to go deeper with these relationships.
Yeah, I remember when you shared that with me, how you were noticing that you even started to experience deeper conversations and stuff with your patients that you'd already met several times before. That's when I realized, like, okay, this is cool. This is something that's clicking and becoming a part of you. It's not it's because there's to an extent, like when we recognize this and we make this change in the beginning, it's like you have to be very intentional about it. You have to kind of start thinking like, okay, I'm gonna, instead of staying surface level, I'm gonna go deeper, and this sets the foundation, and then I'm gonna go deeper in the dentistry and see what's important to them. So there's like, in the beginning it's very intentional, and over time it becomes a little bit more muscle memory. And so when you shared that with me, that you were seeing that your approach was changing with recall patients, that's when I was like, okay, he's got it. This is something that's beginning to be hardwired into his approach now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really fun to watch that and be a part of that and experience that with people.
So I want to talk a little bit about some other things as far as increasing production per day. Is there anything else that you want to add on, or talk about with this whole process of case acceptance and conversations with patients, recording, listening, reviewing, stuff on that area?
Just that, like a lot of things, it's going to be a little weird. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, and it makes a real difference in your life, and it'll make a real difference in your patients' lives and your relationship going forward. So it's certainly worth the discomfort of having to analyze your weaknesses and then working on your weaknesses to make them stronger.
Yeah, well said. I think there's certain things that are maybe more uncomfortable than others. Change, I would say, for the most part, change is usually uncomfortable in some regard. Um, but when the change is something that is pointed out by someone else, and you having to learn to be open to it. Even when you were talking about listening to your own consult feels like you're listening to someone else and thinking, "Oh, I could do better than that person," but yet that was you. So it is. I just, again, I really appreciate you sharing this perspective, and I think it highlights such a great way where you already thought, and you were already doing relatively well in consults, and we just found some ways to continue to optimize and just kind of like raise the bar. And it's such a fun experience that deepening those relationships and all this leads to a higher productivity. And it's what you hear a lot of dentists say, that I think, how many times I heard in dental school when I would ask some kind of business question, the response from instructors was, look, just treat patients right and you'll make more money. Like, that's just how it works. And to an extent, that is very true. If we can change our approach to being more service oriented, like you're talking about, people will trust us more. They'll be more willing to talk through concerns and come to us in looking for treatment options. So again, yeah, thank you for sharing that aspect as far as everything in regards to case acceptance. So yeah, let's jump to what we had kind of talked about last podcast, I kind of threw out there that during the first 6 months working together, that you increased your average production per day by 50%. That's basically like the difference between our first quarter and second quarter. That was the increase that you saw. And in our call, it was interesting from my perspective. Like, I was looking at this like, wow, this is really, really cool. Look at this. And, we have a spreadsheet. I was pointing this out, we were both looking at it at the same time, and looking at it together, and was pointing out to you like, look at the average between Q3 and Q4. And if I remember right, like, you were actually pretty surprised, like hadn't actually recognized the growth in such a short period of time. Do you agree? Is your perception any different?
No, you're right on there. Yeah, I was surprised by how big the jump was. And I was very surprised, especially when looking back at the change from quarter one to quarter two, two to three, and then three to four, having this huge spike. And yeah, as far as my goals were, we increased production by twice as much from it, but the goal was to go up by 25% in 6 months. We went up 50% in 3 months. So in half the time, we doubled the goal. And it was startling to see that, honestly, but it was really cool to kind of look back and see all the things that we'd worked on to get there.
Yeah, just listening to you, that just brought a big smile to my face. Um, and we kind of took the opportunity, and then we reflected and kind of said, what do you think are the biggest contributors there? And I think a lot of times when people have a down month or have a down period, they like to look at things and say, what has caused this? What's going on in the economy, or like, what's wrong with our systems? Why is this happening? But all too often, we don't take the same approach when we see this big jump. When we see this increase in performance, we don't take the same opportunity to say, wow, okay, what went really well that allowed us to see this. And so when we had that conversation and stuff, you said something that I loved so much. I wrote it down and told you I was going to quote you, and I'm going to quote you on it right now. And you said, the more that you can get things aligned, the faster you'll see growth. So talk to us about that quote. The more you can get things aligned, the faster you'll see growth. What were you referencing there, and what are your thoughts in that regard?
Yeah, I when I sent it, I don't know that I thought as much of it as you did, but looking back, I think it is a nice it's a nice line there. It's a good sentiment. Um, I think, I mean, that I've been very intentional and very focused since we started working together to be as proactive with everything that we talk about. So I have felt highly motivated, and I've seen that getting some things into alignment has really accelerated the rate at which we're moving. So that's getting personnel, so getting everyone on my internal team on the same page and making sure everyone is operating at a high level, getting everyone on my external team, my consultant and marketing, whoever is helping support the practice from the outside, making sure everyone's in line there, making sure that we are improving the things that we're talking about improving, be that case acceptance, be that new patient flow, whatever our action items are. The faster that everything gets into place, the faster the net change is coming out the other side. And so as I've been thinking about this too, it reminded me of like a shopping cart where all the wheels are all jammed and facing different directions. So if you imagine your practice like this shopping cart and all the wheels are pointing in different directions, if you're trying to push that thing, it's going to have tons of resistance. It's going to shriek and make all kinds of terrible noises. And if you start focusing on a couple of those wheels and get them, greased up and swiveling and in alignment, you might still have one that's out of alignment, but at least the car will push forward. It might still make a noise, but at least you're moving. Then once you have all those wheels in line, you're not thinking about the cart anymore. You're just thinking about where you're going, and it's so much more effortless, and it can move so much faster. So as these things start cooperating with each other, and the vision gets lined up and aligned, things just move so much more quickly and also without less effort if you've put in the work on the front end.
Yeah, I love that. That's the shopping cart analogy is really good. Did you make that up or have you heard that somewhere before?
I made it up. I'm sure people have related things to shopping carts before. It's a trope that has many applications. But as far as this example, I
Yeah, you're gonna be my go-to alignment person that I'm gonna be quoting, and I love the shopping cart analogy. All of us can resonate so much because you go in and there's like one wheel. There's just one wheel that drags a little bit. It's like, oh, put that one back. I'm getting a different one, or just one wheel is off, and so like, yeah, it's very easy to think. Yeah, then you think about that in regards to your practice and how if things are not aligned, and we're all kind of going in different directions, it's going to be really hard to get anywhere. In the book, there's the book Traction by Gino Wickman, I think. In the very first chapter, he says, if any company were able to get every employee on the same page, rowing in the same direction, this company would basically be unstoppable. And we see that to an extent, right? We see small businesses, if they can do this, very they're one of the strongest businesses in the community. But it becomes more challenging as you scale. How do you continue to provide this vision to other people and get the masses to all be rowing in sync with each other in the same direction? So I think this goes along really well with what you're talking about here. Um, so yeah, what else would you talk to as far as your process in getting alignment or continuing to grow when it comes to what we're talking about with this goal of increasing production per day?
I think it was really helpful to sit down, you and I, and talk through it all, over the phone, and really figure out what were the things that were the biggest barriers, what was slowing me down the most, what did we need to address first, and then when we identified that, then we broke it down into action items. So what are things that we can work on, that I can work on over the next month to start to break down this barrier? And having simplified those into specific steps and then reviewing those steps every day, just making headway on small steps that worked toward a bigger goal, and then broke down these biggest barriers. It was we chose some of the bigger ones first, so that it takes more effort to get through those. But as long as you can break it down into more bite-sized pieces, once you get through those first few, it just gets easier and easier, especially as you are as you're motivated, you get through those, and then it just gets easier, and there's less resistance, and things get better, and it just gets easier, and then you start to reap the benefits of all your hard work.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think all too often, and I can relate to this as well, when you're early in ownership, or I mean, it could really be at any point in your career or any area of your life where you're trying to grow, you're trying to improve, but there are so many different directions that you can go. There's so many different things that you can do to try and grow. And it's challenging to know what are the ones to focus on that are going to get me the most traction. What is the lowest hanging fruit? And I think in my experience in having coaches myself, this has been the most beneficial part of coaching, where you can have an outsider take a look and to see what is the lowest hanging fruit here, what are the things that are holding you up the most that we can focus on and improve in that regard.
The lowest hanging fruit, sometimes just starting with some simple, easy ones, and just working from there.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. The last thing that I wanted to touch on, I actually wanted to talk about this in the last episode, but we didn't get to it. Was this process that we went through just a couple weeks ago in the beginning of January, where we kind of looked at and evaluated the your numbers for 2024. We looked at kind of the growth trajectory that you had gone through, and then we used that to set goals for 2025. Um, and we had the spreadsheet up and we were able to kind of talk through. And the fun part about this is that we could just kind of both look at it in real time and plug in different numbers as far as working days per month, production per day, goals. So that was a fun experience to kind of look at together. Talk through that a little bit as far as your side of that perspective, because we kind of went through that activity and exercise, and it sounded like that kind of opened up for you a new way of approaching each year or approaching goals with a little bit more intentionality. Tell me and talk about your side of that experience.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was eye-opening for me. So having the spreadsheet open, having production goals up, and how many days I had planned to work for the coming year, and looking at our goal for production per day, being able to change any one of those numbers and forecast out the year, and how much um, growth per quarter should be our goal, and then where would that land our production at the end of the year. Playing with that and seeing what that looked like was really helpful. And then it was especially helpful looking at our last quarter where we increased production per day by 50%, to suddenly say, what is a reasonable goal for increasing production per day by each quarter? And then looking at steady, sustainable growth, and being able to say, these are conservative goals, but look at how impressive the outcome is relative to what we were planning on. And as I've continued playing with those numbers in the spreadsheet, I realized that the goals that I had, the 2-year goals, where I wanted to hit by the end of 2026, I suddenly realized those can fit all within 2025 and even before the end of 2025. And it's a another one of these things with the mindset where, if I can see where I'm going, and if I can get the plans in place to get there, I know definitely both that I can get there, and I can likely get there sooner than I anticipated, as we've seen from the last quarter. So it's been eye-opening, and it's again elevated my mindset to what are the possibilities, and we can probably do it even faster than that. So it's both raising the goal, shortening the timeline, and believing and expecting it, and then doing all the things necessary to get there. So it's been a really cool experience.
Very well said. I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's another good example of the way that you have really taken the TLP principles and like everything that we've been talking about, and you just run with it. Like yeah, you show up to our calls very excited, very ready and willing to understand what are the next steps and to go. And I think I'm excited to see where we continue to go from here, because even so far it's been really enjoyable. I was telling you, I think just like just like in dentistry, you have certain uh, patients that you enjoy, more than others. It's the same way in coaching. There's certain clients that, I really appreciate the all the action that is taken. And by and large, like I feel really, really fortunate, because I feel like the people that are attracted to TLP are those that are pretty self motivated, and you definitely um, have checked that box. And so I think, again, kind of tying things together, I think you are very responsible for the success that you've achieved, and I have a huge amount of confidence that you're just going to continue to grow, exponentially, and to hit any goal that you really want to. So thank you for the time that you've taken to share all your thoughts and everything on the podcast. Really appreciate it, Teagan.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate all your help and support and direction, and I'm excited to see where we go too. I think the sky's the limit.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Once you get a taste of that ceiling being raised, it's fun to just like keep going through that process over and over. So again, Teagan, at the end of last episode, you shared that you're happy to have people reach out and email you if they're interested. So I'll put your email again in this episode as far as show notes. And for anyone that's interested in working together, feel free to reach out to any of us, Steve, Matt, or Derek at thelifestylepractice.com. Take care, everyone, and we will talk to you next time.